But there in the last paragraph at the end of the book, it said, some new ideas are here needed. And so there I was. Some new ideas were needed. Okay, so I started to think of new ideas.
Well, I don't think there is any question about it. It can only be attributable to human error.
How does it help do that?
I don't know. I need to start my J-Day practice.
You're the reason this species is a failure, and it makes me angry.
This is Analytic Endeavors with Nick Thompson and Dr. Xander Mausoff. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Today we are here to talk about encryption, privacy, and everything in between, and some more stuff too. This was kind of brought about, like we wanted to talk about this in particular because of a bill that is before our legislature right now, and I think Xander's done a little bit more research into it, so maybe he can speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, so this is kind of, a topic that's privacy and encryption in general have been an interest for me kind of as a hobby on the side, but I think it's particularly important right now as there is some legislation that, if it goes through, will affect every single person who uses the internet or a smartphone and anything like that. And I think Nick kind of feels pretty strongly about this topic, kind of a big advocate for privacy and civil liberties and things of that nature. So kind of getting into this bill, it's co-sponsored by Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal. So it's actually one of the rare bipartisan measures here. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Nick?
Well, invading our privacy is generally a bipartisan thing. But...
yeah, everyone seems to get behind that, which should concern you perhaps. But it's called the ERNIT Act, and it has a title, and they kind of disguise it under sounding like it's very noble, and in parts of it are. I think the general thought of it is.
Well, in my opinion, it's one of those things that it always starts from really good intentions. Like, I do think that the people who are backing this and who created it do have good intentions, but going along with that, it's also our duty as citizens to keep those best of intentions in check, and I think that's what needs to happen here. So,
yeah. I'm not sure on their intentions on this one. I'm a little concerned. It seems like I've seen these senators come at similar issues regarding the internet and privacy from, in my opinion, like not a good intent, like with net neutrality, for instance, which is kind of a whole other topic. But that was kind of getting a lot of attention in the last several years, and that I definitely thought that. I think a lot of these issues are not full of this good intent. Like, for some people who might not know, but I think the people really crafting the bill and the people really pushing it, I think do have some, malice.
That is true. That's true. I mean, I guess I was giving him the benefit of the doubt, but you're absolutely right. Just real quick, I know this is a tangent, but real quick to give an example of maybe police unions lobbying these lawmakers really hard to pass this law that will make it easier, granted, probably easier for them to quote unquote fight crime and solve certain crimes, but at what cost is kind of our point here, right?
Yeah, and I think that point will become a little bit more clear in just a moment when we kind of explain what this bill is supposed to do. So real quick, I haven't defined it yet, but the ERNIT Act, which was first put in the first drafts in 2019, stands for Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect of Interactive Technologies Act of 2019. So Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect of Interactive Technologies Act of 2019. Kind of hard to say.
Okay.
But what this bill effectively is aimed to do is they want to remove end-to-end encryption of messages. They basically want to force people like Apple, Facebook, Google, anyone who makes a secure messaging platform to provide a backdoor so that folks like the FBI or local police agencies can intercept messages from people's phones. And so they basically want to end this thing called end-to-end encryption, which basically says, I'm going to send a message to Nick, I craft that message, I send it over, and the only person that can decode the message is Nick on his phone.
Right.
When you're sending a message, a really basic way to think about this is if you just think about two cell phones. If I have a cell phone and Nick has a cell phone, when I send it over to Nick, the phones aren't in a direct line of communication. There's a server in between, and that server, in this case, just relays the message. It does not decrypt the message. It just relays the message. It doesn't know what it is. It just sends it off. It's kind of like when you send a letter through the post office. They don't read it before they send it to the person.
Right.
But effectively, jump in, Nick?
Just to say real quick, if someone were to quote unquote look at the message, all they would see is kind of gobbledygook, because only the sender and the receiver have the code, for lack of a better term, to decrypt the message. So
right.
if someone did intercept it, they couldn't see it anyway. It'd be like if you sent a letter through the mail and you had a secret code, and you and the person you were sending it to had that code. It's the same kind of thing, just in a technological realm. Right.
And this is something that is used on almost, WhatsApp, I think Facebook Messenger. I think most messaging services use this because they want to, you want to have some confidence that your messages are private. This technology was actually developed long ago, primarily by the NSA, actually, which is kind of interesting.
Right. I just wanted to mention that it gets a little squishy when we're talking about people like Apple, who make hardware and software, right? Because those are two similar but very different in certain ways. Things where, if you got the backdoor key to a piece of hardware like the phone, well, then you could look at anything in the phone.
Right.
Whereas if you had the backdoor to the Signal app, let's say, which is a secure messaging, text messaging app, if you had the backdoor to that, then you can only see the text messages. So just to throw that out there.
Right. Yeah, it's basically like if what they want to do is, be able to read, if we're using the post office kind of analogy, you're sending a letter, and at the post office, they want to be able to read it and then reseal it and then send, and then send it back through there. So like they want to read it in between. Whereas what, Nick's also talking about, if someone can just take your phone and enter the passcode or go around the passcode, they can obviously read all your messages because they've all been decrypted on your end. So, there's kind of two things to talk about here. And this bill is really aimed at this being able to, without having access to the physical device, be able to intercept and read any message.
Right. So more of a software feature, but even more than that, it would be a built-in application on their end to actively go into your phone without your knowledge or permission. In some cases.
Well, again, they're not. I don't think they're. This isn't going into your phone. This is getting the message before it even gets to your phone.
I see. Okay.
Case.
Okay. All right. So that's
really like
distinction.
why it's powerful. They don't have to have your phone.
Right, but I'm just saying if this bill passes, would they have a backdoor to the app, meaning that they could read messages that were previously sent to their surveillance of you? Meaning, can they see your old messages?
Could they see your old messages?
And this is a bit.
That's only. My understanding is what they want is, they want these companies to hold the messages on their server, and they can be encrypted and be held on their server, just like people have credit card information that's encrypted on, Visa's servers and this and that. But yeah, they'll be able to read them. I'm not sure if retroactively. My understanding of the algorithm, which is pretty limited, is that I don't think retroactively they would be able to go back and read messages that are already encrypted and on, for instance, Apple's servers. But going forward, I think that's what they would like to do. They would like these companies to keep the messages on their servers, which I think they probably do keep something now, but it's totally useless.
Because everything is encrypted.
Because it's encrypted, but they want to say, okay, it's encrypted. Now we have the secret key, the backdoor, and we can decrypt it.
Right.
Yeah, so I think going forward, but yeah.
When we're talking about text messages, too, for people who don't know, a lot of those are stored on a cloud-based system, meaning that if they were stored kind of in between, so to speak, the sender and receiver, they're not always. I think people have an assumption that the messages stay on your phone and your phone is what is storing those. And frequently, especially, Apple backups and stuff, and, Signal uses servers to hold those messages, and that way if you transfer to a different device or something, like I have it for my desktop as well as my phone, and I can see them both there. So whether they are being stored by the app developer or by saving some space on your phone, they can be stored pretty much anywhere.
Right. They can be stored. But yeah, again, this is just
okay,
they want so I think the problem is this backdoor.
Right. And it obviously has great implications. Now, I do want to mention, just because I do like being a devil's advocate, even for things that I don't agree with, there is legal precedent for searching people's even metadata, their phone messages. Like the courts have ruled that just like papers, physical papers and letters, you are not always secure in your documents if a crime has been committed. So very recently, it's been announced that Jesse Smollett, however you say his name, Google has been ordered by a judge to turn over all of his essentially metadata, because Google is such a large company. They have so much data on him. That's going to be text messages, that's going to be pictures, that's going to be location data, possible recordings, audio recordings, depending on what apps he's using. So there is legal precedent for doing searches like this. What makes you feel like this is different, Xander?
Yeah, and that I think that is the discussion, that kind of why we wanted to have this discussion. I'm not even sure I've quite made up my mind, but it seems like they want. There are several problems with this. The first one is they want to make a mathematically secure algorithm unsecure, and they want to put in a backdoor, which I think inevitably will make everyone less secure in other aspects of. Basically, like, they're going to make a backdoor, and they're assuming only good people, governments, trust agencies will do this.
Right.
And then it's kind of like, there's really no guarantee that doing this, that people wouldn't, what's the check on these people, spying on your messages, it's really hard to, guarantee that they'll always have a warrant, that they'll be, basically, it seems like it'll be just another way for people to get into your life, people like the government to spy on you, and also people like various other outside agencies, like other countries, further kind of ways for them to spy on their constituents.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to make the argument like this is going to lead to a safer America, right? Because we can, if we're suspicious about this guy, I think in particular it's really targeting child sex abuse.
Right, and like child pornography
documents
and
too,
exploitation and stuff like that. Right.
So, again, it's one. So that's why I think that the people probably do have the best of intentions. Like, I don't think even politicians want to see children exploited, right?
Right.
They're even they are not that evil. Okay, that being said, Xander makes a good point. It is kind of that slippery slope argument. Is it worth it to give up our privacy and freedom to be a little bit more safe? Now, frequently the argument is, well, I don't do anything illegal, so go ahead and watch me. That's fine. If you want to use my metadata, that's fine. I'm not doing anything wrong, so no problem. But I feel like, in particular, that's really short-sighted, and just because the best of intentions are on display right now does not mean that will always be there for a particular company or government agency or what have you that is given this power. Xander, do you agree, disagree, or have thoughts?
My biggest concern is making a backdoor for something like this. It's the algorithms and the methodologies for securing these end-to-end encryptions. is very similar to the way that we secure other forms of online transactions. And I think making backdoors and extra ways to get around these really, really awesome algorithms will lead to breaches of security in other places and further degradations of our privacy. And I think the biggest issue I have with it is, and this could be a bit debatable, but people doing illicit activities, there are other ways besides peer-to-peer messaging like this. There's even more secure ways, like going outside of Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, that people can use to communicate totally anonymously.
Right. When you have a backdoor to something, to a program, let's say, and then you give that key to someone, you have interjected human error into a mathematically, essentially perfect equation in terms of encryption, right? So whereas that message was perfectly encrypted, and there is not enough computer power, on Earth currently to decrypt your text message, but now a government agency or a company has a backdoor to that message. Well, before it was mathematically perfect that it was encrypted. Now you've introduced human error in that, people's motivations might not always be good, and, companies might have a motive for profit that is not good in the public interest. Is that
right? No, that's true. I didn't even think too much about companies having this access to not just, people talk about metadata, which is more of the time, the date, the location of the message, sort of everything besides basically the message contents itself. Now you couple that with the ability to get the actual message, and it's just another data pool, and I think that definitely would be exploited. Yeah, true, by other companies and any kind of bad actors trying to criminals being able to read these messages can learn very private things, and they can use that for identity theft and other methods. And yeah, my larger concern with this is, okay, this happens. I just think it will affect people doing nothing really wrong more than it will catch a lot of criminals. Just because there are more sophisticated ways to securely communicate online.
So essentially,
just these basically built-in things from Facebook, Google, and Apple. There's more secure methods using Tor browsers, using these very anonymous chat rooms, using torrents, stuff like that. There's unindexed parts of the web, and there are browsers that don't communicate through one server. They communicate through these sort of networks of servers where it's hard to pinpoint where messages came from and entered. It's sort of a side internet, so to speak, and you can communicate very securely through those channels.
Right. So people who are just texting back and forth, who are not texting about anything dangerous, are going to be able to be exploited. Maybe not now, maybe not even in the near future, but at some point, the possibility is there. I guess that's my takeaway here is once you put that backdoor in place, you can't lock the door again. You'd have to go to a completely different app, or
they'd have to
do
switch
various
systems.
things. So
yeah, right.
Right. So I do think that the slippery slope argument is valid here because it's uncontrollable once the cat's out of the bag. So we have this one chance where we still do have encryption, and we still do have encrypted messages, and once we decide that, okay, if it's a government agency, that's one thing. If it's a company, that's one thing, has access to this, that's going to be an interesting future. That might happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I do understand what they're trying to do. I think the cause of trying to reduce online exploitation of children is really good. I guess the question is this the best way? I'm not sure. And, maybe it is okay to do this. Maybe...
Well,
I'm trying to think of what it's similar to. Does the government have the right to read any of your messages if you've committed a crime?
Right, and this is where it gets really, really interesting to me, because we have been wrestling with questions of privacy since our founding as a country. Really, before that, civilizations have been wrestling with how much privacy you get and how much the government gets to intrude to make sure that, things are better for people overall, right? That's kind of, we're all agreeing to be in this big civilization, and we're agreeing to follow these rules to, generally have a good society. So we've been talking about it for a long time, and I think, certain people say, especially on the big government side, I'll just say it, they say, well, the technology now makes it so that we have to do this. So it's different than back in the day with pagers, like let's say from the 80s, or old school telephones, right, with the mob in the kind of 50s and 60s. And then before that, various, I guess you'd use like a courier service or something, like there have been ways to communicate securely for all time, basically, right? So I don't think that the argument that, oh, well, cell phones make it so much easier to do crime, or, modern technology makes it so much easier to do crime, we need this other thing, the backdoor, because it's so prevalent now. Do you put any stock in that, or?
I put a little bit of stock into it in that the sense they're trying to prevent crimes
best of intentions,
distributing media. Well, just the crimes of distributing media online, I think maybe what they're also trying to catch. But it's also, I think you're right in that people have always, wanted to have some secure communication. And I think, there is, that, you can tap phone lines and do things of that nature. So maybe it is similar, to the previous precedent with, just basic phone calls, and that the government, required these people to like allow them to tap phone lines.
Right.
I think the concern is that this technology is very fundamental to so many other aspects of life on the internet that introducing these backdoors really compromises the security of many things. And also, to the larger point, I think it won't be that hard for people really wanting to communicate securely about illicit activities to switch to a different platform.
Well,
that's my experience.
If anybody listening wanted to, it would take 15 minutes to download Tor browser and set it up and get on the dark web.
Yeah, it's not that challenging. I'm not an expert on all of it, but I've I've
downloaded it and never gotten it to work. So.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I
it's
don't
not
understand
like super.
It. It's very not user friendly, so I don't really understand it. But
yeah,
Oh, but go.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think what we were talking about at the beginning, distinguishing between taking the messages in flight, so to speak, with what this bill is trying to get at, versus just taking the phone and getting access to that, so you get all the messages. I'm more okay with them being able to unlock your cell phone.
Interesting.
And I think, like, say you committed a crime, like, we have a warrant, we would like to look at your messages. I think if they go and look at your cell phone, that's to me kind of like, well, we have a warrant to look at your mail. We want to open your mail. Right. I'm not actually sure if that happens, but
it does. For sure.
I think it does. To me, that's more similar, because that is just a one-time deal, and that doesn't compromise these other as much security features. I mean, it does compromise the security of your phone, but I think I'm more okay with that one, I guess.
So in this case, are you picturing like a traffic stop or something, and an officer has reason to believe that you just stole the car, and he says, if you can open your phone and I can look into your location data, I'll know right now that you didn't steal this car because you didn't come from where it was. Like, are we talking about that, or?
I mean, it sounds very reasonable. I guess I'm not sure.
In that case, right?
But in that case, what I would object to that.
Well, what if the subject is black, let's say, and the officer is white, and they feel like it's because, like, I think that yes, that is very noble sounding, and that in that exact case, it's very reasonable. But that exact case is never going to happen, right? That perfect world case is never going to be like, yeah, sure, here, I'll show you real quick. Like,
Well,
that's fine.
isn't that the premise of that show?
What show?
Isn't there a TV show on Netflix that they are recording everything through the person's eyes, and then they ask,
Oh, well,
like,
there's
like the security guard, like, before they go in somewhere, he scrolls through your tape of the day to make sure you weren't doing anything.
this is like a Black Mirror thing.
Black
Oh,
Mirror.
okay, no, I haven't seen that yet.
That's kind of the premise of an episode of Black Mirror, I think.
Gotcha. I've heard really good things. I just shockingly haven't gotten around to it. So
That's like I've watched one episode of it. And that was the
gotcha.
one
I've heard
I
it's
watched.
very dystopian, kind of Twilight Zone-y. So
Yeah,
seems
well,
up
no,
my alley.
But that's the thing. I mean, that
Right.
exact situation, that's what the officer would do.
Right. But my counterpoint to my own
Mm-hmm.
little story there is, why should that person have to prove like that?
Prove their innocence.
Right, exactly.
Right.
You're asking them to prove a negative now, and they could, and maybe they would even be willing. Like, my thing is,
No, I think you're right. You shouldn't have to prove your innocence. I think, yeah, the innocent until proven guilty is definitely unless
I
they
think
have
this,
a very specific
right, and this
rationale.
presumptive collecting of the messages really flies in the face of that. I mean, it's the Fourth Amendment says you're secure in your papers, basically, and that includes your mail. If you are not now, people will always get back to, well, we're only going to use it if there's a warrant. It's like, okay, that's what you say, and I believe you. I believe that you think that. I do. But that, like, the average person arguing for this that thinks it's good policy,
Right.
not the policymakers. I do believe you that you think it's better and it's going to save police lives and civilian lives and yada yada yada. At the same time, I disagree with you. Like, I don't think that it's I don't think that trade-off is worth it. Maybe I'm on the fringes of the freedom and privacy thing, but yeah, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. That's a good point, bringing up the guilty, proving your innocence, basically,
Right.
would be a situation you might be in more often with something like this, where they can frequently access your phone. And yeah, it does seem dangerous. I guess I don't have my mind totally made up on this one. I guess my instinct is I'm always very concerned when people want to make a backdoor when I hear backdoor for encryption, I think that is not going to go well. That is how major security flaws happen.
Right. And do you attribute that to the human error aspect? I mean, because you're introducing the human part of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just introducing the fact that, okay, NSA develops this backdoor, and then people know about the backdoor. And then, or someone from the NSA gets out, and they're just having a conversation. They're drunk at a bar, and they just let something out slip. I mean, basically, the thing is, someone makes a backdoor. I don't think that stays a backdoor for very long. Well,
there have been proven instances, and I can look it up right now, of the NSA losing those that they always called it a toolbox of code essentially, that was one of the let's see, NSA lost codes. Yeah, okay, so it's happened. I'm going to find this. Security breach and spilled secrets have shaken the NSA. New York Times, 2017. And I've read this stuff before, but I'm just jogging my mind right now. But basically, it was a whole toolbox of stuff that really only really high-level government people should know about or have access to, and it was eventually put on the dark web, and really anybody has access to it now. So
yeah, I just think it just needs a lot of care needs to go into how these laws are set up, because the other thing that this is getting at too, and what is further complicating it, is these companies like Facebook, Google, Apple that produce these messaging apps are also not in favor of this, because it can make them liable for the content used on their platform if they don't comply with this law. So they're kind of getting bullied, and then they'll basically take on extra liability. Now, some say that that could be a good thing, but basically, right now, like if you post child pornography on Google, you upload it to Google Drive, Google can't be sued for having that. No, like if they're knowing, I think they knowingly try and screen this stuff out. But basically, in the Telecommunications Act of 1996, there's this section 230, that these companies are not liable for what users post on their platform, because if someone says some hate speech and this and that, like they can't, and that's so I think some people will look at this also as like, well, okay, all these other companies don't want this to happen, so like it could be a good thing for everyone. So like I think it's also kind of trying to pit tech companies against people as well, and sort of some pushback onto them. It's kind of further complicating the matter. That's sort of potentially kind of a problem.
Do you have a New York Times account?
No.
Because I'm being locked out by their thing. But
yeah, I don't.
The Baltimore city government, I don't know if you heard about the ransomware that hit them. Was directly...
No, I've heard about this from a lot of places, though. It's hit several counties.
Okay, it's like really, really bad in Baltimore recently.
Mm-hmm.
I actually haven't checked in this lately, but the code was traced back to being produced by the NSA. It was part of the breach in 2017 that's now holding Baltimore hostage. So
right.
Here's a clear example of human error, or a human essentially choosing to share this code, and now it's just out there. So
right.
Once if the backdoor hadn't been created, and I don't know the specifics of the code in the Baltimore situation, but essentially if you hadn't made this backdoor or this code, nobody could have gotten it, and we wouldn't have to worry about it. Same thing could be said for WhatsApp, Signal, all these things. Once you unlock one of them, the precedent then is set legally too. We got to think about this too. Just because the Messages app, let's say, the Messages app today, maybe it's the Pictures app tomorrow, and then in fact I guarantee you it would be. And then maybe it's your podcast app the next week. Granted, I'm getting into conspiracy territory here, but I think that's what you have to do to imagine all possibilities of this going the wrong way. And I think that you agree this could go horribly, horribly wrong pretty easily.
Yeah, I think it's a pause for concern, and I'm always very worried when these lawmakers are proposing stuff like this. And they seem to do it at times when no one's paying attention. Like that's also just, that's anecdotal. To me, like when they were trying to pass some anti-net neutrality stuff, which basically was trying to make the web less free access to the web for everyone and any website. They did it at a really odd time, and they tried to pass stuff in the middle of the night. And right now they're doing, there's always stuff's going on, but I've heard very little news about this, and I just think it's something that it's high-level federal law that will affect every single person. So that's why I just find it so interesting.
Yeah, and to me, it's just one more thing that the government or big companies want access to. It's one more incursion on our daily privacy that is quickly, I think, in my opinion, it's quickly drying up. I don't think we have a lot of privacy in this digital age, and this might be one aspect of it that we can still cling to, and I think that we should, because once, like we said, once the cat's out of the bag, it's really hard to get it back in there. So
yeah, well, and you were also, I think, we were talking a little bit offline about the Ring, the Amazon Ring cameras. That's kind of another, we're seeing more and more, like that's another area where we're, getting privacy infringed on very clearly.
And encryption plays a role too, because these cameras are said to be encrypted. And I was not able to find an instance of a Ring or really any smart device being accessed by somebody through any means other than basically a weak password, like a brute force attempt of just guessing some common password. So I wasn't able to find any examples, and they might be out there. Email them to us, but I wasn't able to find any examples of specifically the Ring and the smart home devices being hacked yet. And that's what I say yet. If you do, maybe smart devices are next on the Backdoor list after the messaging app. It's like, well, okay, we have the messages. We need to know what these people were saying. Like if a drug dealer had an Alexa in his house, her house, I guess.
Right.
That could be really valuable information. Is that worth it? In my opinion, no. I honestly don't think so. I don't think that it is worth catching those couple of drug dealers that are that dumb to have that in their house. I don't think it's worth it. Do you have anything else to add before I go to this next thing with Ring specifically?
Nothing super specific, but yeah, I think the Ring was interesting, and and kind of going beyond that, I think it's going to be going to cars, anything with an internet connection, and you're seeing them trying to track your car, and it's like it's just going to get to more and more the point where it's more looking like these dystopian futures like 1984, where they can survey where you're at, and look, it might be more safe. It really might,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is to me like a central philosophical question that needs to just be talked about as much as possible for everyone living right now. It's just really deep.
And for future generations, I think too. What we do and say now has huge impacts on, because we're one of the first generations to deal with this digital privacy thing, right? So our decisions right now are gonna, I have kids, are gonna affect their futures for the rest of their lives. So I take this seriously. It's maybe seems silly to some, but digital privacy is a big thing to me. Now, what I was gonna say was we've kind of focused mainly on kind of the big government aspect of privacy, right? And their kind of police and official incursion into your data, okay? With in the perfect situation warrants, that kind of thing. Now, here's where Ring comes into play. What is the obligation of privacy of a private company that sells a service to you that you willingly sign up for? Okay, so for example, the Ring. Okay, Ring cameras are incredibly cheap. The big reason they're incredibly cheap is they sell your data to, when I checked, it was at least half dozen different, essentially data agencies out there, Facebook being one of them. That is very concerning to me, and it is a very different, and I think even more challenging question to try to throttle some of the rights that companies have over your data. I think that is actually going to be a harder fight to win than against the government in some respects, maybe.
I think especially when I think, and this is an important one too, when you're bringing up Ring and these companies where the code is closed source. We don't know what the code is that actually they're running in general.
Cameras, right?
Whereas this peer-to-peer encryption, actually the code is available. You can actually understand how it works. Like that's what's so amazing about it. You can explain how it works perfectly. It's just you cannot get around how secure it is in a typical sense.
It's kind of like you can explain a decoder ring, but unless you know what letter letter goes to which one to start with, then you still won't understand the message. So you can understand how it works perfectly but still not be able to decode these messages.
Right, and because you can look at the machinery, you can look at the source code. Whereas these closed source platforms, that's where it's hard to saying, hey, we're doing this with your data. It's like, well, I don't know what the code is that you are running that is processing this data. It is, and that's why you see some like Signal, like we've talked about Signal a lot. Maybe just briefly, just mention that Signal is developed and the code is open source, and it is a secure peer-to-peer encryption messaging app. But it's open source. You can go and look at the code. if you're savvy enough and you're familiar, even if you're not, if you're just curious, they will show you exactly what program they are running on your phone and on your desktop. That is a very powerful thing, because you can say, well, okay, I can trace what they're doing, and it's all they're not saying, okay, send data to anonymous company X, right? Divert this data path here, something like that.
It's very easy to keep them honest that way, because really experienced coders can basically look at that and say, oh, okay, I can see where this data is going. It's only going to the sender and the receiver. It's not going to Apple or Facebook or these other data agencies. Like, because the code is open source, the programmers can literally kind of crack open the hood, so to speak, of this app, and they can see exactly what is happening, and they can say for certain that your data is only going to basically who you're sending the message to.
Right. So to me, that's a very powerful thing. And these other companies, that's not always the case. For various reasons, too, I get it, but...
yeah, and then Ring in particular,
I just want to mention...
doing...
sorry, just one other quick thing on source code being open. Is the other thing about having it open and being available for anyone to inspect is it makes the code more secure. People look at it and it's tested all the time, because people can hack it, people can do whatever they want, and it's tested by lots of people. So to me, it can be with things like this more secure. So
right, because it's got more eyes on it, essentially.
Well, yeah,
it's not
people
just
are trying
a
to
team
break
of
it, people
programmers.
can take it. Yeah, and it's easy to work on a problem and then just sort of... I just want to mention that too. I think in some cases it can be more secure technology, actually, which is... Anyway, open source software is very interesting.
I was just going to say, an open source conversation would be pretty interesting at some point. I'm kind of new to the concept, but it seems pretty dang cool. So
yeah.
But getting back to the kind of corporate privacy or the right you have to privacy from corporations that you willingly, we've all clicked on those 55-page agreements for software that we don't read, right? Of course, that's so stereotypical, but they can do a heck of a lot of weird, in my opinion, weird and possibly unsavory things with your data when you click accept on those things. And a lot of people don't take the time to look at them. It helps that it helps the company be private, because, like Xander said, the code is not open source. So particularly what worries me about companies like Ring that are owned by Amazon, that also own many, many, many other apps that really have nothing to do with security, privacy, really anything. So there's an article which I can post to our Facebook or something about let's see how they what was I going to say? They bought a facial recognition software company and are loading that, like a light version of that, into Ring, and they're using that because you only need a few rings per block to track people, essentially. If you have a street of 10 houses and 3 of them have rings, you can, depending on where they are, and almost everybody has a ring now, it seems like, you can get a pretty good view of the street and track people pretty easily, and even be able to identify people coming and going from your house without you knowing. That's the other thing too. They don't have to tell you that they're doing that. So you didn't know that your ring has facial recognition technology in it. Maybe that now they would say, oh, well, we're going to use that, and then the feature is going to be that your mom or dad can come over, look at the thing, Ring knows it's them, and then it'll unlock the front door. I guarantee you something noble or something, kind of ease of life kind of thing will be the excuse for putting that feature in there. But I think we can all see how that could be used for nefarious purposes pretty quickly.
Yeah, it seems... I didn't know that they had that facial recognition software in it, but facial recognition and all that's gotten very advanced. And like you said, yeah, they can track you, and which, I mean, hey, maybe that is a good thing. Maybe they will catch someone, who's on a a missing person report or something like that, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, but for sure. And they could catch a hardened criminal coming to your door.
Yeah.
the police in their perfect world, they would say, okay, well, the Ring saw this hardened criminal coming to your door to kick it in. They were able to tell the police that it's this hardened criminal immediately, and maybe they could get there faster to help you. That
Yeah.
would be the argument, which is
Yeah.
it's a good argument. It's decent anyway. It
Yeah,
makes you
I
feel
think-
safe. It makes you feel good, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, some people it might be just fine. I just think people should be aware of what they're getting into and just be concerned. A private company with access to this data is incentivized to make money from it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
to say what, and that's
And-
and especially if it's closed source, you don't have a good check on what they're doing. Maybe they are very ethical, but at the same time, if they're trying to, make money,
But
to
we don't
further
know.
their
We can't keep them
shareholders,
honest on it.
hard to say. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's just kind of my general comment is to push for open source software where you can, and push for people to really make user agreements more clear and support companies that are, taking this stuff seriously.
Right. Yeah, that is important. I try to go out of my way to use open source software, and I'm not financially super well off right now, so I don't donate often, but when I do, when I can kick in a few bucks, it is worth it. And really, those people are on the forefront of your liberty and privacy by doing and making these open source apps and pieces of software, and then providing them for free. I mean, that is a pretty noble thing to do, in my opinion. Things like Signal.
Yeah. So I guess shouts out to Signal, the secure
Right.
messaging app, which is
Right.
yeah,
We're
free. You
not
can
paid
look
by
up-
them. This is not an ad.
Not paid by them.
Hashtag
but they
not
are,
an ad.
Hashtag not an ad. But you can look up their Signal source code online. Yeah, I can look at it right now. The documentation, it's on GitHub. It's licensed, open source.
Real quick, have you noticed how cheap TVs are now?
Oh yeah, TVs are very cheap. Well, that's a couple different effects.
Somebody high up at Vizio basically just said straight up, it's mainly from us selling the data after you purchase it. They call it like a post-purchase monetization. The chief technology officer for Vizio said.
Wow.
I have an article here just talking about how that is why TVs are so cheap, and you can get a 4K TV, like 65-inch, for $500, and that type of quality 20 years ago would have been a few $1,000s, I think. If you look at those old Fry's ads, that is what is most hilarious to me, the computers and TVs and shit.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
It's
they've gotten
like
all cheaper for
$6,000 for a 40-inch TV, because that,
Yeah.
back in the 80s, like, that's what they were. It's just crazy.
Right.
So yeah, that's a big reason that TVs have gotten way cheaper. The technology has gotten cheaper too, but yeah, that's
selling
a huge
of data.
reason.
Yeah,
So.
I guess anytime you're using, people I think have kind of learned this, but if you're using a software that is
I have
free or
something.
cheap, your data is being sold. Is that
Oh,
simple?
can I give you a good little saying?
Oh, sure.
If the software is free, you're the product,
Right,
meaning you,
right.
the consumer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
that's-
your
yeah,
data
said
is
that
what is
first.
making that as free.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't remember who said that. That is a total steal. But the other thing I wanted to mention is going back to the government thing. There is a weird fusion going on of the two, in that Ring, going back to Ring, has partnered with upwards of, I believe, 400 local police offices around the country. And they actually have an interactive an interactive map of the country that you can click on your state and zoom in and see if there are any police departments around your area that have that program in place, that essentially the police do have a backdoor and can see through your Ring camera whenever they want to, without a warrant, because that is a now this is interesting too. You've made an agreement with that company. That company then makes a legal agreement with a law enforcement agency. You didn't make that agreement with that law enforcement agency to give them access to your Ring doorbell. Is that constitutional? I don't know, but that seems kind of messed up.
Yeah, Nick's law advice. It seems messed up.
Right. Yeah,
No,
that
I
is
mean,
my
yeah,
official
no.
law opinion.
Nick's
It's
law
jacked up,
opinion.
man.
No, I mean it's messed up, and I think, I mean, it is. Yeah, it's
I
one of
don't
those
like
things.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I my department is not hooked
it's
up,
super
and I'm glad.
questionable. It's super
Right.
questionable. Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't have any of these devices in my house. We don't really, and I'd consider myself tech savvy and program all day, and I just don't have a great deal of trust for these kinds of situations. Now, if you really want, you can actually make a Ring camera for yourself. You can make a webcam that you can access too if you wanted. It's actually not that expensive.
Oh, really?
With a Raspberry Pi and a webcam. I've actually done it. You can run a Linux
Oh.
distribution, and you can set up on a private on your own
dude.
server where, I mean, on your own private like Wi-Fi network, and you can access it.
Right.
Which
We
then
should-
fail point is accessing. Yeah, it's all over. It's basically not that expensive. You look at people, Ring cameras are cheap because it's cheap to do. A Raspberry Pi is $40, a webcam's $10. That's all you need. So, anyway.
We should do like a how-to at some point, because I would honestly
It's
be
pretty
really
cool.
interested in that.
Yeah, I did it at work. I made a coffee camera, so you could basically I had a camera, a webcam pointing at the coffee maker at all times, so you could see the status of it without getting out of your chair.
Oh, I thought someone was like messing with it and you were spying on them or something.
Oh yeah, well you could also, yeah, exactly, but I could also spy on people when they're getting coffee.
Oh, that's that. Well, I thought we were
anyone
going
could.
creepy with it.
Anyone
I thought that's
could,
what
yeah.
you were doing, but
Yeah, no, it was
Right.
just to basically monitor the coffee levels, which fun.
And-
I did it in honor of the first webcam at University of Cambridge, which was for
Oh,
this
yeah.
exact same purpose in 1991. The first webcam was
Oh, gotcha.
to monitor the coffee levels in University of Cambridge.
That sounds about
I
right.
believe, or Oxford, one of the two.
That's
Anyway,
an important
so-
bit right there.
but it's pretty easy to do. So if you want to have something like this, I just would encourage you to. And that's actually something I should look up. Is there an alternative company to Ring that's open source, running a Linux distribution that you could check out yourself? That would be interesting to know.
All of these Google cameras, I'm honestly not really familiar with their smart home.
They have
thing.
their
I'm not sure
little
what it's called,
ecosystem.
but-
They have the same little buttons,
Right, so
hubs
just,
you can
you know,
connect
the-
together.
Right. So just whatever it's called, the Google version of it. And then also, gosh, there's so many people getting into that. Yeah, that cheap camera. Oh, Simply Safe too. Like Simply Safe, it seems like a really, really good deal, but they also don't tell you what they're doing with your data. And there have been some, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think there have been some instances of people watching, because their whole thing is put our cameras inside your home,
Right.
and then if a crime's taking place, we can see inside your home and tell the police it's taking place right now.
Yeah.
Which seems insanely gross to me. Like I would never
Yeah.
want cameras inside my house, even for me. Like that is gross. But you know, so basically, yeah, all these companies will do the same thing. I don't know about this other like kangaroo company I just heard of. It might even not even be a real company. I don't know. But yeah, there
Kangaroo
are
company, Kangaroo Corp.
right, exactly, Captain Kangaroo. Yeah, so yeah, my first instinct is always government or corporation is you need to know less about my personal life and data rather than more. My reflexive kind of thing is no, you don't need that much access to me.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a valid?
I think it's fair. I think it's
thing,
valid. I
or-
just think,
yeah.
you know, people will bring up all these other ways it can benefit their lives, and that's just something that we want to weigh. I mean, you can look at,
Yeah,
just
true.
what weighting do you put on these values that we have? Everything's always a trade-off. I think everyone knows this. So
Right.
that's something I think
If
we need to look at,
you-
and I just think it's something that's so easy to get quickly answer and not think about, and this kind of legislation just needs to be, you know, you as a concerned citizen should be at least looking at it, and
Right.
looking at who's sponsoring it, and, you know, what the motives are for it.
Yeah, and trying to understand, you know, you don't need to understand the mathematical algorithms behind encryption. Just know that it is, you know, it is mathematically guaranteed to be private. And if you give somebody this key, there's no going back on that particular app. And it, you know, if it's and then my other thing too, just to kind of piggyback, is once the precedent is set, especially legally, that a messaging app is not subject to the same search and seizure laws as other things, I think that especially in the digital realm, that could be misconstrued by courts very quickly, meaning
Right.
that I don't think that your legal right to privacy in other apps would stay for very long if we lose the messaging apps.
Yeah, and you've seen how silly these lawmakers, these guys in Congress, when they had like Mark Zuckerberg up on trial, they
Oh,
looked
yeah,
so.
geez.
I don't know if they were trying to look dumb, but they seemed like they seemed pretty dumb. It
I
was like
doubt they
kind
were
of
trying
sad.
to. That would be an interesting strategy. All right, boys, we're gonna go up
so-
there. We're gonna make our jackasses of ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
So
know,
these people
but
don't understand these details, but again, I mean, in my larger point, with all this encryption specifically in messaging, is that criminals will be able to go around it. And it's interesting, people like Lindsey Graham are willing to promote this kind of bill when he, I imagine, is pretty big, supporter of the Second Amendment and guns. And I think a lot of those people make an argument along the lines of, well, criminals, if we ban guns, criminals will still get them because they're criminals.
right.
I think that's
Yeah.
kind of a oversimplification, but people make that argument on, people who are more in favor of the Second Amendment. People will get access to them regardless of the law. So I think you can make a similar argument here for this kind
Right.
of secure communication.
Definitely. And I think it's just one more example of reasons to, not trust any political party or really any politician what they say. Like let their actions show you what they really think. And Lindsey Graham, I don't know the dude obviously, but he talks a big game about conservative principles, but then on basic privacy issue rights like this, he is so far in the totalitarian
Right.
side of things, in my opinion. Okay, here, I am no fan of Bernie Sanders, but he rails against people like Bernie Sanders and their democratic socialism ideas because he's going to need, essentially he's going to have to force people into doing things, right? He's going to have to force people into paying more taxes and that kind of thing. And yet, Lindsey Graham is fine with forcing people to expose their private documents, text messages or documents, and that flies completely in the face of the Fourth Amendment. And then, yeah, if we want to go to the Second Amendment, we could look up how much money the NRA has given him over the years, but I'm sure it's been a lot. And the exact same argument gets made. So he can see it in the guns case that, criminals are just going to get this technology, or criminals will just get guns here, but he can't understand that criminals will just get other communication platforms in this other arena. So yet another example of hypocrisy from the Republican Party, and specifically Lindsey Graham right here. So
Yeah, it's just disappointing. And so this legislation that we've talked about at length here, the ERNIT Act, might be, parts of it might be okay, but I think it definitely would, some revisions and some, I think, better understanding of what's going on is reasonable. But I think we've kind of bludgeoned this topic not to death, but we've talked about it at good length here, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Any other things to mention real quick? Or
No, but I just, well, I guess yes, because I just want to bring up, supporting these companies, like you said, that are in favor of privacy and encryption staying relevant and, in your life. So I just want to mention a couple off the top of my head that I know of. Mozilla Firefox does a good job of doing, I think their code's open source, and they prevent a lot of online trackers. Also the Signal app, and also Telegram. I don't
know that one. Is that a messaging one, or?
Yeah, it's another messaging one, and there is
gotcha.
Yeah.
We should mention DuckDuckGo, of course.
DuckDuckGo, so these
That's
places, I think, if you care about these things, go out of your way to, frankly, avoid some of these larger companies that are going to infringe on your privacy. So that's kind of all I'd say. Be educated and, look out for yourself. You got to be smart on the internet here. I also would suggest getting a VPN from a reputable company to secure your traffic, especially on wireless networks that are public, things like that.
Geez, yeah,
So
for
we
sure.
can talk about more at this, but that's just sort of my closing thoughts is what you might be interested in doing personally.
Yeah, I want to mention something real quick before you
Mhm.
close because I want to get your opinion. Apple has been
Uh-huh.
pretty pro-privacy, actually.
Mhm.
And I've been surprised that a company of that size has not, I mean, there are certain instances where they haven't taken a big stand, but there are instances where they have. And I'm an Android guy, not really by choice, honestly, at this point. I hate Google, but and they're well, okay. I love Google products. I hate their privacy incursions. So there. But Apple has surprised me with their willingness to stand up to federal government prosecutors sometimes and say, no, we will not give you that data. Do you think that they are worthy of us supporting? Like, do you think we should all go to Apple and support them financially for that stand, or is it a paper tiger kind of thing, just for show?
Oh, I think there's probably a lot of people there who genuinely support privacy. I think they're generally going to be looking out for their own interests, and I think they understand the security problems better than anyone. I think Apple's one of the most profitable companies in the world, and if you like their products, great, buy them, I guess. I use some of their products; they're great. I don't
Mm-hmm.
buying them for privacy. I'm not sure is something I would say, just in my opinion.
Gotcha.
But I don't have a strong, feeling sentiment either way. I don't think they deserve special support for their stance on privacy though.
Okay, well then one more thing before I let you go. How do you balance, you personally, how do you balance the ease of use of some of these things? Like you said, especially the home products, right? The smart home products are really marketed toward that easing of daily life. Not that we need it any easier, really, but these like convenience thing. We know you don't use many smart home things, but do you use apps where that they use your data in a way that you wouldn't necessarily like? I do. I have
Yeah,
apps that are just more
there's
convenient.
yeah. I mean, if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn and some of these other ones, they will track where you're going online and try and sell stuff to you. I guess I don't care as much about that. But the things that I go out of my way to do that are inconvenient is is using a VPN anytime I'm on a public network.
Right.
So that's a huge one because that's where you're extremely vulnerable to people stealing your data. And I go out of my way to use Signal, to use open source products where possible. I actually was just thinking I would like to use a cell phone service that has an open source operating system as well. So
Now,
Android
when you say
is
service, yeah,
I mean,
so you're talking about operating
an
system.
open source operating system. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So you can see
Are
exactly.
there phones
also,
like that now? Or?
Yeah, there are some. I mean, Android is just a Linux-based device. It's just they have done some features to it, but the core kernel, the core features, it's sort of like the chassis of a car, but they've put their own bodywork on it.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, it's a Linux-based system, so it's basically the same as what runs on most servers and on your laptop if you download it. But it's got
Right.
So it's the same idea. So I'm pretty sure there's some open source ones out there, but they're definitely going to be more annoying to use.
Right. I looked into it a year or two back, maybe something like that, and I haven't switched to a lot of those things because I've heard that the quality of life stuff there is not quite where it needs to be yet. It's kind of like the Tor browser. Like I downloaded it, started to get it set up, and then I couldn't figure out how to actually get on. So I never actually did. But so it just seemed like it wasn't user friendly enough for me. Like I'm okay computer wise, but I don't do the typing commands or anything like that. Which I know generally if you're going to use Linux, you kind of do that. So
you get going through the terminal or
right
pretty
the
much
terminal,
helpful.
Yeah,
I
do
stuff,
not do
but,
that.
it's not that it's hard. People definitely can. It's definitely not user friendly. It usually if something goes wrong, it's really cryptic error messages and stuff. But
gotcha.
it's
okay.
Yeah, I think stuff like that. Being considerate. There's something else I wanted to mention on that regarding just privacy. Yeah, it's a hard problem. It's definitely a hard problem, But yeah.
Yeah, and we're, I think we're mature enough to say that, yeah, we are okay with, in certain instances, if you do have a warrant and you can prove to a judge that, hey, we need to see these messages because this person is a danger, blah, blah, blah. Sure, okay, there is legal precedent for that as well. We are mainly against the kind of bulk collection, that intermediary where they're all stored in between. It's just too much. If you want to look at individual stuff, maybe okay, we can talk about that. But in my opinion, the bulk collection and that kind of thing is too much. So
Yeah.
Did you think of what you were going to say?
No, I didn't. I couldn't.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to say my outro. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you liked this one. If you did, please rate us and share us with a friend. If you didn't, please keep it to yourself. And maybe send us an email, analyticendeavors@protonmail.com. Tell us what we could do differently or better, whatever you want. And yeah, again, thank you for listening. It really means a lot to see the download numbers and hear people that are listening. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
All right. Bye.